Two-thirds of Americans are broke and living paycheck to paycheck. Most Americans are broke and living paycheck to paycheck. Half American small businesses are now shut down permanently. Consumer debt levels are piling up. In America, the land of the free, home of the broke, Americans are finding it harder to pay the bills. 63% of Americans have been living paycheck to paycheck. The middle class went broke to imagine the poor people. This week we learned that there wouldn't be any more stimulus checks for the American people in a time when a substantial portion of the population is desperate for another round of checks because they are almost entirely out of cash. In fact, a very alarming survey that was just conducted found that 1 out of every 5 Americans could be soon out of money. Nearly 1/4 of U.S. consumers say they have less than 3 weeks of the financial runway before they run out of cash, according to a weekly survey on Americans' finances by consumer finance company Credit Karma. 1 in every 5 Americans could be out of money soon. America is broke and bankrupt. We are at the Keynesian endgame. We are now headed for the greatest depression ever. America is also in debt up to its eyebrows, which certainly doesn't help. The end result is central bankers created the biggest, most egregious bubble in financial history. A $250 trillion debt bomb, with another $500 plus trillion in derivatives trading based on its yields. To put this into perspective, the tech bubble was about $15 trillion in size. The housing bubble, which triggered the 2008 crisis, was about $30 trillion in size. The bond bubble is over $250 trillion in size. Some $50 trillion of this is in sovereign debt, with the rest coming from corporate debt, mortgages, auto loans, credit cards, and the like. The $2.5 trillion stimulus money is only going to go to the gangsters, the bankers, just like last time. The bankers are laughing because they already stole tens of trillions post-2008 with all the politicians on top of the trillions they stole pre-2008. Tens of trillions are hidden in offshore Cayman accounts. The central banks have created what can only be called a super bubble on steroids. 93% of global economies are contracting, and 7% of global economies are collapsed. Central banks are buying everything in sight with newly printed capital. Capital that will be worth next to nothing when it trickles down to you. But that's the plan. The Federal Reserve is simply finishing its mission from its inception in 1913. Their plan is and has always been to be the buyer and lender of last resort. The end goal is to own it all by destroying the currency. Once they own it all by creating a currency crisis, they will roll out their digital cryptocurrency, FedCoin, which is based upon their test pilot program, better known as Bitcoin. Welcome back to the Atlantis Report. You are here for your daily dose of the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Please take a second to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and don't forget to also hit the notification bell. Many of you have asked me where they can buy silver and gold bullion. You will find in the description box the links where you can buy American Silver Eagle, silver bars, or rounds. I highly recommend that you start stacking some silver bullion for the future. It's the lockdowns, they have paralyzed the economy. You can't shut people down from making ends meet. Dying is one thing. Being broke from not working is another. It doesn't need to be both. So 100% of oligarchs are getting wealthier while 93% of everyone else is getting poorer. I imagine there is an urgent meeting going on right now in Davos or some other really cool place trying to figure out how to fix this terrible mistake they made. I wonder if closing down restaurants is yet another way the globalists are forcing people into the big box grocery stores, which means food source becomes more centralized and hence more under their control. Food is the ultimate controller, even more than sex, drugs, and pro sports. More likely an asset and property takeover, disaster capitalism. The goal is to close all but Amazon. This is just step 1 for them. The big box stores won't get to stay either, they just think they are special for now. One-stop shopping nationally. They think that way there is total control. Bigger picture. It's the Great Reset. They intended to shut down the economy in stages until they implode the dollar for the reset. They are boiling the frog in the pot until it's too late to jump out of the pot. They are bringing the ID 2020 digital identification. You won't be able to sell or buy without it soon. Better pass on the mark. The federal government exceeds 50% currently and will probably exceed 65% under the coming administration. Government control of an economy is communism by definition. Socialists and corporatists will band together to destroy a mixed market, free bargain economy. The corporatist will pay lobbyists to get the socialist to write laws to bankrupt the capitalist. Those in the government create conditions for their job to remain relevant. In reality, we would be better off if they were not able to vote for their own pay increases, receive pensions, and make a career out of robbing the rest of us. Fiscally, America is kaput. America is broke. The U.S. public debt situation is presently the worst since World War II. America's big problem is that there are too many welfare queens, both corporate and personal. The productive can't support the non-productive anymore. Simple math. The ones who should really be afraid are the ones who can't live without a government nipple in their mouth. Unfortunately, there are a lot of those types because government policy has been to create as many dependents on government as possible. 50 years of globalism created a couple of hundred billionaires and bankrupted everyone else. 1913, the year control of the economy was given to foreign banks. 1963, Kennedy hit, the year the middle class was assassinated. $40 trillion of pension funds invested by Wall Street in China alone. $27 trillion of debt run up. 30 million U.S. jobs offshored to China, including 6 million manufacturing jobs. 100 million immigrated into the U.S. in the past 50 years. 50 million illegals. 63% of all immigrants now on welfare, and the rate increases every year. 2 million green cards and H-1B visas per year to drive wages down. $40 trillion paid in welfare reparations with zero effect. America is broke, China is worse, the EU is toast, and Russia, even if not in as much debt, is not far behind. If we catch a cold, the world gets pneumonia. Know that much. The debt storm approaches, slowly, then all at once devour everyone. No one shall escape. America is the Titanic, and it is sinking in an ocean of debt. The U.S. is running up its debt over $3 trillion a year with $27 trillion already on the books and promises to its retirees and Social Security recipients of another $200 trillion. We passed the signpost some years ago, and into the twilight zone is where we are headed. Meanwhile, Wall Street has reported record profits this year. Average bonuses for bankers have risen by as high as 40% from last year. And that's hard to hear for everyone on Main Street suffering the effects of the global crisis. The banks want us to pay their bad debts. They are not too big to fail, they are a bunch of money junkies that want every penny we worked for. And here is more sickening food for thought. Americans owe over $11 trillion in home mortgage debt, and that's just for 1 to 4 family. It does not include multi-family and commercial mortgage debt. That number was only $2.6 trillion in 1990, now less than 20 years later, it is over $11 trillion. And we owe over $2.5 trillion in another consumer credit-related debt: cars, boats, RVs, credit cards. Credit cards make up a little less than $1 trillion of that $2.5 trillion total. That number was up from $800 billion in 1990. So, just in home mortgage and consumer-related debt, we owe almost $14 trillion on assets that are very likely worth less than we paid for them. What's worse, we do not pay the low interest rates on our debt that the government spends on its debt. Household debt has been growing for 5 years, but mortgage balance growth has been on a slower incline since it stopped declining in 2013. When the Federal Reserve lowered interest rates in 2008 to fight the recession, giving consumers more incentive to pursue the typical 3 to 5 year loan for autos, it kick-started a trend that has held true today. Auto loans continue to increase because of low interest rates. Student loans, they continue to escalate. When the Bankruptcy Protection Act of 2005 was passed, making it more difficult for people to file for bankruptcy, there was a turn toward credit cards in a desperate attempt to pay bills. So credit card debt soared, reaching its all-time peak of $1.028 trillion in July 2008, an average of $8,640 per household. Most of that debt was due to unexpected medical bills. Banks followed suit, cutting back on consumer lending when the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform Act increased regulations over credit cards. By April 2011, credit card debt fell to $839.6 billion, a figure that has remained somewhat flat, although the average American household still owes $8,398. People are freaking out about the national debt, but at least the government can tax and print money. And how about state debt? While Americans as a whole carry significant amounts of debt, each state has its own unique problems. The makeup of state-specific debt reflects not just the national economy but also factors like unemployment rates, the worth of homes, and the cost of college. Credit policies long pursued by central bankers based on the Keynesian model of rising inflation have brought the United States to the brink of economic collapse. In the final analysis, even wealthy nations cannot afford to live beyond their means to support progressives, social justice, welfare programs. Nearly all the developed world is at the Keynesian endgame and the end of the dollar, unless we find a wholly new source of national wealth. Globalization and free trade agreements have led to the outsourcing of well-paying jobs from the advanced nations and a boost to the growth of developing countries. Unless reversed, this trend will continue to the detriment and ultimate collapse of Western economies. We must become net exporters and keep balanced budgets. Due to the current misguided policies, unemployment is going to climb and will probably stay high for years to come. We need job-friendly, business-friendly, profit-friendly policies that lure jobs back to the U.S. and keep people from going out of business and encourage people to start businesses. What they are proposing is just the opposite. Scary, scary stuff indeed.